Fields. Welcome to Great Sacred Music. A special welcome to those joining online. Born in Wales in 1593 into the aristocratic Pembroke family, George Herbert became public orator at Cambridge University and then a member of Parliament, apparently destined for a life at court. To much surprise, he decided to be ordained, and after spending a period with his friend Nicholas Ferrer at Little Gidding, he became incumbent of the parish of Bemerton near Salisbury. The most important thing you need to know about George Herbert is that he used to attend this church, although not this church, because this church was built in 1726, long after he died, but in the late 16th century, the second of the three churches that have been on this site, when he was about 16 or 17, he came to St. Martin's, and as you'd all agree, attending St. Martin's is the pinnacle of anybody's life. Back in Bemerton, there were never more than 100 people in his congregation. He died after only 3 years in his parish. He wrote prolifically, his hymns still being popular throughout the English-speaking world. And he was only 40 when he died in 1633. It's our tradition at Great Sacred Music to begin with a hymn, and so if you'd like to take the leaflets, and on the second page, you'll find the text from Herbert's poem, The Elixir, which talks about finding the divine in the everyday, and uses the term philosopher's stone, which was not invented by J.K. Rowling, but refers to the ancient practice of alchemy, sought to turn base metal into gold. Herbert says the phrase, "for thy sake," turns the humblest action into worship. We remain seated, the voices stand and lead us as we sing, "Teach me, my God and King." Well, Herbert did a remarkable thing in turning from the life of court to the humble life of a country parish. This is what he said when he did so: "I can now behold the king's court with an impartial eye and see plainly that it is made up of fraud, titles, and flattery, and many other such empty, imaginary, and painted pleasures, pleasures that are so empty as not to satisfy when they are enjoyed. So there you go. None of his poems were published in his lifetime, but he bequeathed his poems to his friend Nicholas Ferrer, and within 40 years they'd gone through 13 editions, a total of more than 20,000 copies, which wouldn't be bad today, but considering the size of the population, the size of the reading population in the 17th century, is quite something. Now we're going to hear two contemporary settings, or relatively contemporary settings, of one of his poems, one of his hymns. First of all, The Call, which is Herbert's poem, Come My Way, almost entirely made up of words of one syllable, based around Jesus' single-syllable words in John 14, often read at funerals, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Herbert dwells on each of those terms and adds two other trinities of his own, the light, the feast, and the strength, and the joy, the love, and the heart. And then we're going to hear a setting by Henry Walford Davis of George Herbert's hymn, King of Glory, King of Peace, inspired by Psalm 116. Henry Walford Davis succeeded Edward Elgar as Master of the King's Music and held the post from 1934 to 1941, became famous for his BBC broadcasts in the 1920s, and his work, Solemn Melody, has been played at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday every year since 1930. Let's enjoy these two pieces now. Now, when you hear that George Herbert wrote a poem called Listen, Sweet Dove, you might think he perhaps wasn't a bachelor after all and had a little bit of something going on with somebody in Bemerton that his history hasn't told us about. But actually, that would be a misunderstanding. The dove here refers to the Holy Spirit, and the poem comes from his longer piece, Whit Sunday, and it's a lament for the fact that the contemporary church, we're talking about the church in the 1620s and 30s, had lost any trace of the apostles' original fervour. He longs for a second Pentecost, since it seems the Holy Spirit has not galvanized believers as Christ intended. So I'm sure there hasn't been a PhD comparing Listen, Sweet Dove to Shine, Jesus, Shine, but they are actually making the same point. I suspect we might be singing Listen, Sweet Dove in 400 years' time, but I'm not quite sure that's the same for the other piece, whose title I've already forgotten. This is a setting by Grayston Ives, who was a long-standing organist at Magdalen College, Oxford. Then we're going to hear Evensong in a setting by Bob Chilcott. This uses a very common motif in poetry where we talk about our life as a day. So we talk about the beginning of our life as like dawn and the end of our life like sundown. And those two are going on all the way through. It's a story about prayer, particularly about the kind of prayer that Ignatius talks about. St. Ignatius, founder of the Jesuits, talks about that when you look back on your day and find signs of consolation and desolation, what's sometimes known as the examen. Well, this is a kind of examen as a poem. Herbert is asking himself what he has brought home at the end of the day in response to God's love. He describes himself as having run, but only to no obvious purpose, other than to be like wind or a bubble or foam. But God says it is enough. He asks which shows more love, God greeting us in the new day, or taking us as we are at the end of it. Then he recognizes that the whole day, and you think his whole life, is filled with love, and with that he falls asleep in his bed. So it's good music to die to. Let's enjoy these two now. Well, it's time for us to sing again together. If you'd like to take your handout sheets, if you're in the building. We're going to sing Herbert's setting on of Psalm 23, which is the only psalm in Herbert's collection, The Temple. You may know that H.W. Baker composed The King of Love, My Shepherd Is for the first edition of Hymns Ancient and Modern in 1861 that he edited. And rather like Herbert, Baker makes a move that the psalmist doesn't make, because while the psalm speaks of kindness, goodness, care, and mercy, it never actually mentions the word love. It's often when we read the scriptures, we can kind of slightly glaze over and see the words we expect to see, which actually don't turn out to be there. And love doesn't appear in Psalm 23, but it does appear in Herbert's version of it. Herbert's keen to stress the relationship between the believer and God, and he conjures this beautiful, simple phrase that epitomizes the message of Psalm 23, "He is mine, and I am his." We remain seated, the voices stand and lead us as we sing, "The God of love, my shepherd is." Well, we're coming towards the end of Great Sacred Music for this week. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. If you have, there's an opportunity to make a donation as you leave. You can either leave your credit card with us and we'll swipe it many, many times, or you can just swipe it once yourself to the same amount, or you can empty, because you don't really need cash anymore, you can leave it with us and we'll look after it for you eternally. All sorts of other ways to give, but there's swipe machines at the back and so on. You're familiar with the genre by now, I'm sure. There's also a QR code on the back of the sheets. We've got it all covered. Now, we're entering into Passion Time. It'll be Passion Sunday, 2 weeks before Easter this Sunday, and Choral Classics, our sister programme, is entitled There is a Green Hill, appropriately. Then on Monday, in another sister programme, In Every Corner Sing, which looks at global music. At lunchtime, we have the theme of reconciliation, and next week we're looking here at Great Sacred Music at prayer. We're going to finish appropriately with I've just referred to the programme we now have on Monday lunchtime. It's called Every Corner Sing, and that line comes from the Vaughan Williams setting of Herbert's famous poem, Let All the World in Every Corner Sing. When Herbert, on his deathbed at age 39, gave the temple to a friend to take to Nicholas Ferrer, he gave it this inscription: "Tell him, he shall find in it a picture of the many spiritual conflicts that have passed betwixt God and my soul, before I could subject mine to the will of Jesus my Master, in whose service I have now found perfect freedom. Desire him to read it, and then, if he can think, it may turn to the advantage of any dejected poor soul, let it be made public. If not, let him burn it. For I and it are less than the least of God's mercies." So, it's just as well that Nicholas Ferrer thought he could turn it to the advantage of any dejected poor soul, and that we are among the dejected poor souls who have benefited from it 400 years later. So in this poem, Herbert explores 4 contexts in which God may be praised. He begins with heaven, the throne of grace. He then turns to earth, the scene of Christ's incarnation. He proceeds to the church, where God's name is recognized and celebrated. And then in a pietist turn, he concludes with the human heart, the seat of sincerity and truth. Thanks for joining us.
Amen.